This is not a toothpaste. It's a revolution for your teeth. Remineralized, strengthened teeth, all natural ingredients, essential oils, minerals, salts. Alphavedic Dental Solutions System. That's alphavedic.com/civilization. You know, we're always trying to bring you the best products here that we think will enhance your life, especially if supply chains break down further or if there's some disruption in our lives here. It seems in the news more and more possible, but hey, who knows? Maybe it's a mind game. But what is not is keeping your dental health up. And not a lot of people are talking about this. We always see the storable foods. But what about dental care during these same emergency situations? Will your toothpaste eventually run out? Well, if it does, then what? So like I say, this whole micro gut biome is driven by your oral cavity first. So take a look at what they have, alphavedic.com/civilization. Every purchase you make helps keep our live radio show and podcast on air, bringing you more information just like this. alphavedic.com/civilization. That link is in the show notes below. And as always, I appreciate your valuable time and joining us in this ever and most important conversation as we move forward in our world. Hey everyone, are you ready to grow your own fresh, delicious vegetables, herbs, and flowers this season? If you're looking for the highest quality heirloom and organic seeds, I've got the perfect company for you, True Leaf Market. They've been a trusted seed company since 1974, offering 3,000 types of non-GMO varieties, everything from classic heirloom tomatoes and peppers to rare herbs, microgreens, sprouting seeds, and beautiful flowers. All those seeds are open pollinated, pure, and perfect for home gardeners or anyone wanting healthy, flavorful produce without chemicals. What I love the most is their huge selection, fast shipping guarantees, plus options for bulk if you're going big. If you're excited to start your garden this year with real, authentic heirloom and organic seeds, click the link in the description box below. Check out TrueLeafMarket.com. You won't regret it. Happy planting, and thank you for supporting the channel and this broadcast.
Please remember to sign up for our show notes. With Civilization Cycle podcast, you can learn what to expect as society resets. Agriculture, economy, tech, and history all have mappable cycles, and these cycles affect every aspect of our lives. We can navigate the chaos and thrive together with up-to-date news and information. Also, if you like the content we have here on Civilization Cycle, think about fueling the discussions and the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Civilization Cycle. And thank you for all the support.
Welcome one, welcome all. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us tonight in, well, the market crash edition. Is this the beginning of the financial reset? Could be, or is this the beginning of the ultimate distraction and making you look one direction while other things are happening? So if we survey it in just a balanced manner here, huge amount of information coming out and all these different emails, right? But what could distract from that is the question. We have these incredible weather events going on across the planet as well. Cuba got down to freezing 0 degrees Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit, coldest temperature ever recorded in Cuba. Official now. We got Japan dropping, 2.5 feet of snow in 6 hours. You got 6 feet of snow in a matter of 12 hours. Like these are just absurd amounts of, precipitation coming down in whatever form it is. Floods across Europe, super freezes through, and massive snow anomalies haven't been seen in hundreds of years just keep piling on top of one another across the continents, no pun intended on the snow pile. And now we have this economic devastation that has just rolled in upon us like a nasty, tsunami of nowhere to run. There was nothing that really held through. If you looked at the stock market, you look at the bonds over it. Speaking of Japan, they need to do a massive amount of selling. China is in earnest dumping and selling all their treasury bonds in unison at this moment. This is a tidal wave of things coming back that we have to buy that we don't have the money for. Silver crashed 20% at the same time. Bitcoin crashed 15-20% and is still on a downward trajectory. Reached out to a fair few people who I know that are way smarter than me on this, and I'm getting mixed answers. So I'll try to bring you some of those tonight. There was really nowhere to run in this liquidity thing. Gold down, silver down, stocks down, bonds going haywire. Crypto just it's an atomization is the best word. It's not even a meltdown. It's just atomization. It just broke back into its base forms again. These are, dropped down to levels that haven't been seen since like 2023, and we're gonna just trending lower. Like everybody's selling something to try to get out of their positions anywhere. You got all this insider trading. These guys over in, I'll bring you a couple stories here for $300 billion short positions in China. So they were ready for the crash, so somebody knew something about this. So in unison, I would ask the question, are we at the beginning of the reset now? The financial reset in terms of just how we hold value. Because normally, so speaking of somebody earlier, and we had the conversation of normally on just like a napkin math thing, you would jump into another asset like a risk asset, something risk off. And something, if it gets risky, dangerous out there, you would pull your money and put it into something that would hold value as other things crash down. Just as simple as it can be. If crypto's crashing, people might move into metals, they might move into some sort of equities. Real estate's a little difficult to pull that off in a day or two to buy a building or something to hold. But most times people are just, playing the shell game, moving things around. Okay, it's a little risky here. That sector's heading downward. The mines, the junior miners, crash. Metals prices slammed down. I don't care. Base metals, precious metals, rare earth metals, down, down, down. So everything that had come to this high point where it was becoming unaffordable for companies and governments to operate, it seems that in unison, I don't know why these emails are released right now, because they had, our government had to have known that it would have this type of effect and repercussion, that this would absolutely crash markets across the planet and reverberate for months to come on. I'm talking an absolute economic devastation here. But again, governments and companies needed this down push to try to continue to operate. And who's going to shake out and sell their metal at 70 or 65 for the silver? Companies wanted to get that. It was 120 just a few days back. As we were doing last week's show on Thursday when metals were crashing, the amount of decline from 120 down to, sub 90, put it into like a 10 sigma event, not even a 6 sigma, a 10 sigma event. This is like 1 in a trillion possibility. Today's market crash of silver going down as it bounced back up took it somewhere around a 9 sigma event. So this is in the hundreds of billions of possibilities of it occurring once. So we went from a once in a trillion possibility to once in hundreds of billions of possibilities. This is absolute market rigging and manipulation at the highest levels across all, I mean, all financial institutions and players across the planet in unison to crush everything that is out there. And you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why now? What was known, and what kind of distraction were they distracting from is the question. I mean, we were talking the echelons of financial power here, but they were also wrapped up in all those emails. So we look like which one was washing which hand to try to get you, because the scariest thing for people is losing their money. You got to think about, you have your entire life savings in something. You're 67, you're 70, you're retiring, and then suddenly you're reading about all this stuff coming out and all these bad people doing bad things, and then suddenly, oh, the market's crashing. I just lost 50% of my life savings. Like, oh, well, I'm not even worried about that. I'm just over here now. Who's distracting who? And what were we distracted from? And is this really the beginning of the reset, or is this just like a way for huge financial institutions and governments to get metal back that they couldn't otherwise get because it was becoming too expensive and it would wreck their bottom line? Like, just for an example, Amazon crashed 15% today, down. Like, that's just one example of these larger companies that are having difficulties. So as we okay, we got a comment here, coming in here. Just let me rip this one off. Says, I was paying my property tax. Let me read this one. I received my property tax assessment today. Consistently goes up for some reason. Of course it is. We're coming into hyperinflation event. This is incredibly deflationary, but you got to think about the amount of assets that were moved from one place to another today. Money just doesn't erase, it moves. So this is a wealth harvest that was, imagine the low vibration that went out for these feeding beings and that are feeding off of our energies. A little bit woo woo. And I know it's Thursday night, it's past 10. Kids are in bed. We can talk woo. The amount of negative energy generated or angsty vibrations from this would have been a tidal wave of food going out to those lower dimensional entities that are feeding off of our lower vibrational feelings is the best way. You got to categorize them. We got the fear, the hate, the this kind of thing, and then you got the love and the harmony at the top. These beings don't feed on that. They feed on the low vibratory edge of things. So even just this economic news, evaporation of monies would send people into this lower vibe frequency for a minute. The feeding trough has been opened, and you talk about the gates of hell opening. Something similar, where this is such a large, wide event across the entire planet that the feeding trough is literally at, what type of cycle would it be? Once in 100-year feeding frenzy is going on in the ethereal world. I don't know. The crash in the finances, we're in the fire horse year. And I was looking at my notes here, the year of the fire horse. But again, there's different transits going on as well with the outer planets. Once in an 80-year cycle, different houses are opening. Once in a 300-year cycle, we're coming into Aquarius. That's once in a 2,000-year cycle. Are we at a half cycle for the great year? Once in a 12,500-year cycle. I mean, where do we sit in terms of cyclicity and intensity on this? The fire horse, that's once in a 60-year. So what occurred this week where all of these things were released that could have been released 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 3 months ago? Why now? Like, what was happening in the heavens energetically that would have amplified this? That is the question. And we should all be asking that very same question. What is going on and why now? And is this the beginning of something larger that resets us through 2030? And Buy, consume, obey the authorities. Yeah, I had to move my camera in front. We're redoing the office here. Buy, consume, obey. We should talk about Canton tonight as well. CC coin. This is where all the treasury bonds are moving through in a digitized form. Distant early noticeability on that. I'll pull something up. But anyway, Ransom, I know I'm rambling, man. Got a lot of thoughts in my head over these last couple of days. Like the why now is a big one. But please continue my rant into the late hours here. Ransom Godwin joining me right here. So the Civilization Cycle podcast live show every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for hopping on with us for this ever important discussion. We're casting tonight. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, and we're also over on X, broadcasting live, so you can join us on any of these platforms. And the chat stream I have live up here as well. We'll answer some comments. Invite.com, which I'm going to pop up right now. I was in such a tizzy trying to get all the information ready. So let me take it away, Ransom.
Well, here's a question I just spotted out real quick before we get. Yeah, I don't know where to go, woo woo or not. All of what you were talking about, I have stuff that I was tripping on, similar stuff. Are they pulling the plug? I think we've been in pulling the plug since about 2010, or you could go back further, but it's really intensifying at an exponential rate, and they are resetting. That's exactly what's happening in all areas and aspects of the human domain, all of it. Is there another narrative behind Musk's recent announcement that he will be deploying AI assets into orbit? It's an obvious narrative. That's where we're going. We're going over to a digital global control system. I was talking about this with my son today. He was talking about, well, what if I just, get rid of all that junk and I go off grid? And I said, well, maybe about 20 years ago, you could pull that off. But now it doesn't matter about your device. It doesn't matter about your Wi-Fi. Everybody else has it. So you're incorporated within the system. Everybody's being kept track of. And it's even worse than I think people realize. It's down to the cellular level. And when I've been saying that, it's not a joke. And all of these topics are going to intersect into the reset because all of the same players are behind the scenes, investing, moving their money around, putting forward agendas and narratives and different things like that. And it's such a convoluted spaghetti mess that they know that the average Joe has too much to worry about, like putting food on their plate, paying the bills, and having a roof over their head, that we're all going to be distracted. Maybe not all of us, but the majority of everyone's going to be distracted through the transition. Thank you for your cooperation. No, but we can start right here. Somebody asked you a question about this a minute ago. This seems like a real deal, legit reason that they could get people pumped up in the us versus them thing, the left, right versus right, all of that. They have these triggers that they've already put out there. And I kind of wanted to get to that because
before you even leave that screen there, I'm going to come out hard hitting here and say, there's been so much theft and so much misuse of our monies as taxes. There's a tax revolt going on. People are saying, I'm absolutely not paying this year. You guys, hundreds of billions, if not trillions, has been wasted of our tax dollars. I see these people, just this amazing amount of comments. So people understand that if they do away with it, like we go back to tariffs back in the day, what you consumed is what you paid for. There was no income tax back prior to the Federal Reserve and stuff, right? Like everything operated on tariffs. Like the more you consume, the more you pay. It was like a usage tax, basically. Right. So to do away with property taxes and to do with income taxes, that will keep the tar and feathering mobs away for a minute. Because people in the right mind, I just have read thousands and thousands of comments and see entire websites devoted to this. I ain't paying, man. Right. You look at that. I got a business I got to pay because I got capital gains and stuff. So that's beyond regular income tax. Right.
Well, I agree with all of that. And some people do, all the way up to the state government's level, which is what's going to cause probably, if there was going to be a real civil war, not a manufactured, pushed war about different topics, but a real civil war, it would be something to the effect of property taxes, income taxes no longer coming in. And the reason for that is because, well, that's the main financer of things like the global government, the International Monetary Fund. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is the backdoor laundering that they use to take your money and do what they want with it. So obviously that would, cause problems. But to get woo woo, you don't even have to get woo woo. You could just go back a couple decades right here to the Department of Army's Civil Disturbance Plan garden
Garden.
plot. Right. And you can get into there. So I probably
No,
can't
dive
even.
in, man, and dive in. Matt, I got you an answer for you on the crustal displacement. So we're going to jump over to Buy Me Coffee here for comments in a minute. But Ransom, continue. Dive into this garden plot here.
Well, I barely tipped my toes in it and found that, it's a standard, we have the power, you don't. However, in this document, they predicted all of the events that you're seeing on the streets today. They talk about how they could squash it, how the federal government has enough power to basically take control of local and state governments in order to help them get rid of civil disturbance. And, I can't actually, for the sake of YouTube, go through the whole thing because they have some older, outdated terminology that YouTube would find, because this started in 1968 right here. So you can just imagine some of the terms. But basically, what it gets into, without literally showing you, I'll put the link to this PDF into the chat in a minute. It gets into all of the various groups that they keep track of. And keep in mind, this was before the surveillance state that we have today. And this talks about how that they could go to any town, set up there, make a logistics and a headquarters there, take over civil and local, excuse me, and state governments, and be able to organize because they already know who the disruptive member groups are going to be, which includes blue collar worker groups, urban areas, different minorities, different organizations. But the point being that when you're seeing rioting going out on the streets, they have complete authority that they've given themselves previously, all the way back to God knows when, the Insurrection Act. So they have complete legal authority. The thing that you're seeing on the street is a game. It's a mind control operation to push you in one direction or another. But this simply states that the federal government has already given themselves power, and then they redid it again on September 11, 2001, and on and on. And they keep updating this, and basically it gets into how they can come. It's ironic because one of the things stated in here is to protect the civil rights of citizens within a state, right? And I'm going to go ahead and guess that this is one of their least important objectives of this operation. The other ones are to totally control all trade, all manufacturing, all media, all transit, and people moving around. This is basically a martial law without declaring martial law, and they've had this power for a long time. But I think it's ironic that they call it garden plot because it basically gets into seizing anything they want for the cause, which would have been, those mentioned in the paper, the blue collar suburban and urban areas that could produce their own food. So they're really worried about that more than they are of the groups of people that would be looting or burning stuff down. They're more worried about the groups of people that are, stable, that can make themselves stable and stay stable. So I was going to share that out because literally because of the terminology on it, we might not get away with showing some of the stuff in there because of the references towards people's identities that they would get upset about today. But keep in mind, this is the federal government. This is within the laws of the federal government. So everything you read in there is not just possible. It's already been established since the late 60s. So here, I'll put that in the chat. But yeah, it's basically crazy. And it leads to this time that we're talking about is the
Yeah,
reset. Go ahead.
trying to go continue. I'm trying to get this comment, but it won't click on there.
No, it's up. It's up. I see it. It says they will force it through compliance. Taiwan or Thailand have unbanked millions already. Blah, blah something. Took it away before I read it.
Yeah, and I would say
Anyway, yeah.
that is incorrect. I live part of the year in Taiwan, and that ain't happening. That's mainland China, but it's not Taiwan. So right there, I could say, just having lived there, I've never heard about that before. So when you're looking at an overall view of that, mainland China is notorious for debanking, dehousing, or anybody that goes any one iota, like really 1/5 of 1/8 of 1 inch over, and you're toast, like literally toast. Not going to be able to even live a life. You can't rent anything. You won't be able to rent any apartments. You won't be able to have any jobs. The amount of homelessness where people just don't have anywhere to go, because that's the thing about the social credit score in China is if you associate with somebody with a lower score than you, then it lowers your score also. So even family members are fearful to even interact with somebody of their own family that has a lower score, because the entire family gets taken down. So they have to ostracize their child because you got a 500, we all have 800s or whatever. You got a 400, 300 because you were naughty or something. You went to a protest or you wanted to change something, and you got a 300. Our 800 is going to drop to 500 or something. If you do that, and dad's going to lose his job, mom's going to lose her job. We can't stay in the same apartment complex. We're not allowed to travel anymore. We have to get third-class tickets everywhere if we're even allowed to travel. We lost usage of our credit cards, and we can only use Alipay at a very small minimal amount, and that's what will happen when your score gets reduced. So they're like, yo, son, we still love you, but we're never talking to you again, and we got to delete you off of all of our social media, all of our phones. There's no more contact. Don't call us. If you do, we're going to get our scores reduced and go live on the street with no funds. That's why there's the homelessness is just outrageous. When I traveled on, I was living and working in China for a while. This is way back, and like, just after the turn of the century, turn of the century, but it wasn't like that. There was no homeless, zero. There's like everybody took care of each other. But now it's the opposite, because you got the social credit score, man. They're kicking you to the curb, and it's just you just when we get into a scoring system like that, it's just not going to be fun. Hey, Ransom, before you throw that up here, can I need to share this one if I
Yeah,
could.
I
Yeah, I
lost
want to share
connection,
a
so I
screen.
don't know.
Yeah, we got the. Yeah, thank you for buying me a coffee. I got a couple comments up there that I wanted to throw on. If I can even find it, there we go. All right, another double espresso, Matt. Thank you for that. Another double espresso to add to the 3 earlier. I just turned this on. Here we go. You guys could comment on ECDO theory. That's crustal displacement. Watch Ben Davidson's new documentary, Disaster Cycle Film. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, Disaster Cycle .film is a website. You can go check it out. Wondering your thoughts on that and how you look at things that are changing. Elite clearly know a geophysical event is coming. Want to try to prepare the best I can. Thanks, guys. All right, so let me jump on to this one here, and we're going to share this tab. Just so you kind of understand what we're talking about here with Earth's crustal displacement. They've renamed it actually as exothermic core mantle decoupling theory, but it's the same thing. Earth's crustal displacement, Charles Hapgood. Now, with that being said, now, Ransom, you could follow me on this one. As far as I know, and as far as all these people I've ever talked to, including Ben and many other geophysicists and astrophysicists that I've really sat down and talked with and written questions and visited and this sort of thing, you have to have a complete nullifying of the polar fields. There can be no field at all if we're going to have a geophysical crust decoupling like that. The reason it's locked in place is because the different polarity of the crust and the core and the mantle, and then subsequently when you're going up into the ionosphere, like everything got a different charge. But let's go down to the density of it. So we're just positive, negative. Now they are locked in place because of the different polarity. If something were to happen with the sun, micronova would do it, or like an X200 or an X90 or somewhere along that range. They're borderline on like about an X100 to X120. It could disrupt our field for just a momentary lapse of time. The larger the event, the larger the lapse in decoupling of polarized fields. So at that point, if you came into it would be a sun-based event, and you can think about what that would be. when you came into a nullified charge where it dissipated, where there was no polarity in the crust or in the mantle, they could roll because there would be nothing locking them in place. But as soon as that polarity comes back, they're going to snap shut again. And if that was in motion, it's going to come to a complete lock again. Now, a lot of people say this is on a cycle where it revolves around different parts of the earth where it'll come and then it'll come back in stasis again. A lot of people have been talking about this one. It's going to pull back north again, and we're going to come back into perfect harmony where our tilt is not at 23 degrees anymore. Then we're going to sit back upright, and there will have no seasons at that point. It's a stasis type of thing. And this is why they talk giants of old could live to, 1,000 years, Methuselah. These types of average lifespans of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000-year-old lifespans. If we were at a vertical oriented position and not off 23 degrees, we would absolutely have much longer lifespans. The seasonality would disappear. There would be no seasons. And you got to think about a static and in stasis ecosystem that would not need to change so radically to die off and, I wouldn't say die off, but hibernate and drop the leaves every year. Animals go into hibernation. Look what happens to us and our bodies when we're in the middle of winter. We get lower energy. So imagine if you were in a place that it was like that pretty much 24/7, like living down in southern Taiwan. It is always warm. You never really experience a winter. Yeah, the days get slightly shorter because you're closer to the equator, so you're not going to get those super long 10 p.m. sunsets like, the northern Norway or somewhere, or even longer because you're getting closer to the pole up there. But somewhere, let's say like Prague or whatever, and it stays light until 9:30, 10 o'clock sunset. People are out partying all the place. But in the winter, it gets darker around, starts to get a little bit dusky around 4:30. Down near the equator, if you're living at 23 south or 20 south, somewhere like that, it's pretty much all year round, even sunlight and even temperature. Like your body functions different when you're living like that. You just never go through that hibernation period and you're always going, 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 going. You always have constant energy. You never hibernate. Like right now, these 30-degree Fahrenheit below normal temperatures, I don't like going outside. I'm more of like an indoor doer. I worked on the garage today because we had the thing foamed in there and I'm just trying to build some shelves and things. Didn't feel like going out in the rain and snow today. Didn't feel like it. Just rather stay inside. So back to the exothermic core mantle decoupling, or previously referred to as Charles Hapgood's Earth's crustal displacement. Cataclysm would be from the sun first, and that in turn would nullify the magnetic field or disrupt it tremendously to the point where our crust and the mantle would lose their orientation in charge and they would slip on top. And as that event pushed past us, we would reestablish a magnetic field again, however weak, and those two independent pieces would lock back on themselves. Now, if they'd moved 200, 500 miles and they were still moving and it locked, well, that water's going to slosh somewhere. And then hence we look at Google Earth and we start to see where the water sloshed over previous areas. I encourage you, if you can find Google Earth, Western Africa from like space view, you can see the water cascaded off there. And, if you can go down into some of the Google Earth views into the ocean, you can see where a continental shelf had completely dried out and the rushing water came off and eroded that straight down in there on those on the continental shelves. That's water pouring off of there. Those canyons, those weren't sculpted by just water moving, slowly through the, Atlantic overturning oscillation or something, multi-century, multi-millennial oscillation. That was empty, and water poured in and refilled it, and that sculpted valleys and canyons and contours is because it was dry and it got refilled, and that was doing the erosion and earth sculpting. That level of cataclysm. And, to go right back to your comment on that, because I love this stuff anyway. Where would a good place to be? I want to prepare the best I can. That you just don't know where, when, and how intense the event would be. I mean, that's really a difficult one. Great to be on high ground, but how do you sign up? When you live at the top of Mount Everest and then you survive, or, Ben and those guys, they're out west there. He's very convinced on the wave pattern, the way it's going to slosh. Is where I live up here in the Appalachian Mountains. Is it tall enough?
Yes.
I mean, I just don't know, man. There's really no best answer for that. Please buy a can of Kiss Your Ass Goodbye and take it with you everywhere you go because you just don't know. There's some best guesses based on previous cycles and previous sloshovers of previous water movements on these known cataclysmic cycles. But I mean, can you really prepare for it? What if you're on holiday and it just happens at that time, you know?
Right. All
I
right.
guess I'm going to leave it there. And Peter T, thank you for getting us the
Hey,
double espresso. Thank you. Blessings and blessings back to you, my man. Yeah, we need all good vibes and energy that we can get out right now because the whole world is being thrust into this low vibratory pattern. We need to do the best we can and like embrace that and bring it back out. And you know, every single one of us being that point of light that can add into the positive vibe. Cosmic Wench, thanks for all your hard work, David and Ransom. Matt, here. Heard your most recent interview on with Mike Adams. Really interested to expand these thoughts and see what you think about the geomagnetic excursions. Do you think this time around the 12,000 year cycle that will be as bad as some as it could be? Ben Davids, Roger Cunningham. Trying to get my head around how to best prepare. Stay frosty, my friends. Well, hopefully we're going to stay de-thawed, defrosted.
oh,
Again, is it going to be as intense? Are we? And we need to ask ourselves another question here. On this 12,000 year, how deeply are we marking right on it with Randall Carlson's galactic cross? There, are we at the crossing? Are we stepping off into a new ice age? And each subsequent step down is bringing us into a cooler and cooler and cooler phase. That's an unknown. At what point do we sit on the galactic clock here? We're supposedly, we are moving into Aquarius, right? So that's into a new star sign. Now, generally, everything from the old last 2,000 years needs to be destroyed as we move into a new era. So we're seeing some of this already happening, the destruction of the old world being replaced with a new world. This new world is called Aquarius, and it's a water bearer. So would you expect more floods? Because it's actually being marked in the heavens as a vessel pouring out water. Well, for me, that means more cloud cover, something to do with floods for sure. Birkeland currents come off of the fish on Pisces and connect over to Aquarius. So it's an electrical event on a plasma, filament rope coming through our cosmos to our sun. Maybe the sun steps down and we get more cloudy. If we do have more clouds, that would mean a reduced active sun because more galactic cosmic rays would come in through a weaker magnetic field. Sun would be dimmer, more cloud cover, and perhaps this is the age of Aquarius. It was the age of Aquarius. Maybe it's just a cloud cover, not very high crop yielding, 2,000 years of time. We got a lot of good data from like Leo and this sort of thing moving forward, Aries, but we just don't have data or recollections of an Aquarian period. Because you think about it, you got to go back 25,000 years almost to come to this same point again. We're stepping back, coming out of the last ice age to get to this whole thing. You'd be right around, 23,000, 25,000 years ago to repeat this. Where do we sit right now coming around the whole thing? Leo, great. Like I say, Sagittarius, awesome. But we don't have that kind of dynamic information. So, Ransom, what do you think? Where are we sitting on the galactic clock here?
Well, considering the 12,000 year thing, unless we get bombarded with more objects coming in, then I don't think we'll have like a 12,900 scenario. And as far as the oceans flooding the earth or anything, I don't think so because the pole ice is too small and nowhere in comparison to what existed in those days. So there's no source of the land floods unless it came from clouds. Now, if you're talking about being impacted, of course, all bets are off. You get tsunamis, you get rain, you get changed weather, etc. But as far as the planet actually moving on its axis is kind of silly to me, just because of the precession of the equinox gives us a 26,000 year period in which, at least for the first time, that and like I always say, you have to have seen the pattern to know there's a pattern. So now we're 52,000 years, and then you have to go back 80,000 years to be able to confirm it. And all of that time, not a single, depiction of the stars being changed in the sky has ever happened. So I don't think that's a reality. Now, you kind of brought up some things that would cause massive floods, like whenever the ocean rose 4 to 500 feet after the Hunger Dryas, you had areas like the Black Sea that had mountain ranges and thin pieces of land that held back the entire ocean's pressure for some period of time, and then it gave way. So, and then you also have things like geologic upheaval and downheaval. In other words, we know there's areas in the Mediterranean that rise up above sea level for long periods of time, hundreds of years, and then sink back into it. Now, every time that happens, you're getting a displacement of water, so you're going to have floods and things when that area, and it's very possible that the Giza Plateau, someone mentioned, might have gone up or down, but that doesn't really account for the sustained water erosion like on that, and we can get in that to a minute. But this whole topic's kind of wrapping around to the reset, um, because they're starting to release this information on a mainstream level. And here's an example of it.
Yeah, Ransom, let me interject on your water thing there. There's 3 times more water beneath in the crust than there is on all the ocean, lakes, and rivers combined. There's 3 times more water in our crust. So could something happen to cause that water to emanate from literally under our feet and
Well,
come up?
most of that water is not in liquid form. It's trapped in magma and rocks and things. It's not like a super liquid ocean of water, although there's probably big pockets of liquid
Big
water in our crust.
primary water source.
Um, but water, I mean, you kind of know it would have to be completely sealed for it not to affect the ocean level. And considering how porous our planet is, I don't think that's possible. And that's why you saw like when the ocean rose, you had places flood in Africa and different places because it's so porous that the ocean rose in other places. You see the same thing in Central America with the cenotes. You go down, there's fresh water that's accumulated on the top, but if you go down far enough, there's salt water because it's connected to the sea. And so if the sea rises, so do the holes in the land. It's like a sponge. It also rises. So you would get depictions like maybe the one idea in the Noah story is that it popped out of the ground and started spraying everywhere. Well, that would absolutely happen if the oceans rose 400 feet all around the continent. All of the porous underground rivers and cave systems would be flooded with water, and that water would come up anywhere that was below sea level. Like that's why I brought up the Black Sea, because that's a perfect example. It was at one time above sea level, but when the ocean rose, it became under pressure for long periods of time, and then it just completely flooded out an entire habitated area. So if you lived anywhere in that area, that would have been like a second catastrophe like Noah's flood, but that would have had to come long after the 12,900 period that started all the mega tsunamis and flooding. And it's really beyond argument that there wasn't a planetary bombardment. There's evidence in Saudi Arabia, Israel. You can go on, and you can even link in Gobekli Tepe because they were close enough to literally see some of these airbursts in the sky that were happening around them. So things were blowing up. Things were melting ice sheets. You can imagine big chunks of the ice sheet actually coming back down. And with the whole Carolina Bays thing, I think that's more than conclusive evidence that that's what happened because it coincides with all of the animal displacement and extinction of the megafauna, the disappearance of Clovis man off of North America, and on and on. We have worldwide catastrophe after that point. So unless we have something in that, in that realm, an extraterrestrial body or series of bodies happening, I just don't really see the planet changing that much in that aspect. Now, if you want to talk about magnetic fields killing off wildlife and animal life and human life, we already know that the Lachamp excursion, it did that. We know that that happens, and they weren't drowned in from floods or nothing. They were literally dying of radiation. And that's really, I think, in a real scenario, what we should be worried about, because that seems to be the scenario with the magnetic fields today. And I think that may happen more than once with the transition of ice ages and the end of those ice ages. I think that has a lot to do with that too. And if you really think about it, if our magnetic field is either larger at one time or smaller at one time, that affects the amount of pull or push that you would have on bodies that would be incoming in our orbit. And matter of fact, here in a couple of years, where I forgot what the name of the comet is, but there's a unique situation where a comet's going to leave a debris field right in the wake. The Earth will be traveling through that area. I think 2 more years. I forgot what. I have to get back to that because I forgot. I was kind of listening to it while I was reading, but these things happen every so often, and they're not all on a cyclical pattern. So some of those things will just hit us blindsided. Like you were saying, one day, where are you going to be at? You on vacation when a bolide drops into the ocean? Where are you going to be? Will you even be able to get home? There's not going to be air traffic or train traffic or none of that stuff if it's a big enough event. But I think really we need to get back down to earth and deal with human problems that are more likely to happen sooner. And that would be involved with governments changing, war, and other things like that. And I think the plan now is pretty clear that they want the entire world engulfed in civil war while they reform the system that they're going to have after that's over. I mean, because if you look at Europe, you look at the United States, wherever you want to look, even in Iran, whatever, they're all pushing for these little civil disturbances where this group is tribal against that group. And while everybody's fighting, they're taking the cookies out of the cookie jar.
It's always the distractive phase where things get changed over, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think we're,
definitely.
just intuitively, I'm looking at this saying, all right, and it hasn't really happened in human history the way that everything falls unanimously at the same time. Usually there's something else that holds value while other things fall.
I
So,
mean,
I
have
mean,
you
you
ever?
have to go back several hundred years to find similarities in what's occurring right now. Let me get that back on. I was
Well, I was going to
recording.
say, look at this. Even 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been seeing articles like this. This is the stuff of the ancient aliens,
I
series
like
and
that
things
guy
like
with
that,
big
right?
hair.
Right.
I need his big hair, Ransom. I need his hair.
Right, but think about this. This is starting to come out. Mysterious symbols spanning the globe hint at lost civilization 38,000 years ago. Hello, we've been saying that for forever. And now when they're finally
Forever,
kind of letting
yeah.
it all
So,
out,
do they have any images or any kind of like
oh yeah.
glyphs or anything to look at, or are they just?
Well, they're
Oh,
talking
there we
about
go.
this right here, like this. If I could open this by itself here,
That's in
this step
Turkey.
pyramid, the step pyramids everywhere, literally everywhere in the world. You cannot go to a single culture, a single phenotype that didn't either paint, build, or have this symbol of the step pyramid. It's everywhere. It's from Egypt. I mean, like, and it's not just one, obviously. And this is a good map. I don't know who put this together, but this seems to be the areas that are connected in masonry, if nothing else. Each one of these places, I could tell you, have pyramids and megalithic stones that have a key signature in them, which is keystone cuts. I'm sure you know what that is. That's little grooves that they would cut at the top of the block, and they would pour liquid metal into that to help stabilize their architecture against earthquakes and stuff. And the stuff is so old, there's literally almost zero specimens of keyhole cuts in megalithic stone that still has the metal inside of the cut, because over the ages people stole that metal and made other things with it. But each one of these has megalithic, and it shows that there was an equatorial, at least, civilization up to 40,000 years ago that was probably all connected in high technology civilization. And when I say connected, I don't just mean like, the Masons came over and built their stuff for them too. I mean, they're connected, and it's coming out that they're connected genetically, they're connected historically, they're connected in all ways that count. So something happened, and we pretty much know what that is. Happened about 12,900 years ago. But that's not the only, obvious catastrophe that's happened in this time range of 40,000 years. And what was 40,000 years ago again? The Lechamp excursion, where
Yeah.
all of the other hominids went extinct. And it seems that, people were really scared of that. And that might have been what led to not only them continuing to spread red ochre on their skins as they spread out all over the world, but also why they were building these large megalithic stones that are energetic and have piezoelectricity that would, interact with the magnetic field. And I think they learned a new science when this happened. And not only that, they were trying to protect themselves, as evidence of underground cities all over the world, plus the megalithic stones that they were building their buildings out of, and then all of the new farming and domestication techniques that seem to have came out afterwards seem to be, all of a sudden, it's not a progression where like you see a transfer point where they had little tiny microscopic wheat seeds, and then all of a sudden they had this big wheat seed that they can manipulate with their hand and grain and grind and stuff. That didn't happen. They just came out with already domesticated grapes, wheat, animals that don't exist, uh, except for bigger versions of them in the distant fossil records. So all of these animals that came down after the flood were already domesticated, which tells us that there was already farming, there was already civilization, there was already architecture, there was already everything that we think of today in a civilization. To what extent, we don't know, but whatever happened to them, we've been restarting for at least this long, and every so often we get put back again, even within this small period of human history.
Yeah, throw a quick point out there into electroplates as well, where Penny Kelly and she'd worked with, God, I forget his name, a different scientist that was into electric plates. And what they would do is they would put the seeds between two electric plates, and with different voltages in that and different time spans, they could create an entirely different plant species that would come out with what you just described. Different size kernels. And this was the whole thing on all this work that was being done was it was producing higher yields from the same crops, but instead of domesticating it and taking 10,000 years or 5,000 years to grow it and get it a smidge bigger and a smidge bigger, it was an instant thing, like evolutionary leaps, which Robert Felix spoke about. That was the same exact thing. If you give me a second, but when we come back on the second hour here, I will dig out a couple of images uh, and show that to you. So electric voltage charge is going to affect plant and animal species. So if it affects plant species enough to get it to turn on and revert back from, like, how many ears of corn would come out of our average today if you're going to grow a plant? What do you get? 7 to 9 ears. These things that they were working with come out with 16 ears.
Right.
And they would grow to be 9 feet tall. Right. So this is what happens when they put these seeds in an electroplate system, where it's just two plates and they ran an electrical magnetic. Well, you got to have a magnetic charge, but they put that in and hit it with plasma as well. Electric containment system to change the very structure of the seeds. And you brought up a great point there. Think about with a different magnetic field as well. The ionosphere, that electric boundary layer, would also be weakened. So there would be an enormous amount of plasma discharges, and I'm talking about plasma storms. Because imagine all the electricity that's encapsulated in the entire crust all the way down, if you believe there's an iron core. But think about that full electric system on a planetary scale. If something happens with that equilibrium, it needs to discharge to find its equilibrium. So you would be talking ground to sky planetary lightning if we came into a depleted magnetic field, or something like they saw with their reversing magnetic field. How we understand the electric current boundary layer starting at 100 miles above our head at the ionospheric boundary, like those F1, 2, 3, 4.
He disappeared. But speaking of electricity, check this out. These are this, before I stutter too much. So here is the this is one of the images that they're talking about here in this picture right here. And you see those 3-step pyramids right there? And there's 2 big birds above it, right? You see this in every single culture everywhere. And really, I'm surprised that this article even pointed it out, because usually they don't. They usually concentrate on the H's and the pine cones and stuff like that. But if you see this symbol here, these 3 pyramids and these 2 things, the main one is this middle pyramid. And you find that everywhere, even in Native America. This is right next to me, about 30 miles away at 3 Rivers on the 33rd degree parallel. and you can clearly see two birds and two snakes around a stepped pyramid with a door. And here, I'm pretty sure that the step pyramid represents Sierra Blanca because it's a giant mountain that goes up about 12,000 feet in a sheer face right from this petroglyph site. But this isn't the only one. There's one with frogs on it. There's ones with doors that open up that look like the river goes under the mountain. And one thing that you see on every one of the depictions is this little lightning strike or multiple lightning strikes at the top of the pyramid. Now, keep in mind that the local Apache believed that the four teachers and the white woman appeared on the top of the mountain and taught them civilization and other things. And you find this not to sound like the ancient aliens guy, but you hear the same thing. You hear it in Hopi, uh, tales about people, the star beings coming down to the top of the plateaus in their area. Over here at Sierra Blanca, you go down to Peru, it's up there with Cusco and the mountains, but everywhere you go, you see the same images. So these people on this thing are leaving out like most of the story, but it's basically proof that everyone has the same iconography everywhere you go, including things like the swastika that is obviously paying attention to the the Big Dipper's spiral around the North Star to keep track of the seasons. You see this just everywhere. And now the mainstream's putting it out there because I think we're in that time where we're about to reset again. And I don't think that basically this stuff like this is showing us that we are about to reset.
Yeah, I'm wondering those the rock art that you showed, if that was a transitional, highly electrified display of plasma in a transition form, because you start to see what Anthony Pratt and those guys over in the Electric Universe doing the laboratory experiments, and they can replicate nearly every single form found on rocks. Now, some of them are more complex; they take on facial features, and a lot of times these plasma displays were thought that these facial features were then represented as gods in the heaven, and they were embellished then at that point coming out. Not every single one, but some of them in the previous, let's say earlier transition from divinity as earth worship into a physical form of a being that was then worshipped versus just itself as nature. So
Right.
on a highly electrified sky, in that transitional point where things are starting to vibrate faster and they take on different shapes as they go from, say, a simple spiral current flow or the field aligned currents where you get those charges winding in on themselves. Originally, it would start to look like snakes at first. Then you would
Right.
get the tendrils coming off. Then you start to get Squatter Man popping out where it starts to take on arms and legs and a center body as it starts to spin. Well, at some point, if it was large enough and electrified enough, could it create something else in its transitional form before it snaps into something else? This has been discussed a few times as well as how large were these in the sky that were seen and what kind of electrified sky would it have been taken form in? What color was the plasma and what was the transition density? Because these uh, laboratory experiments, they just change the voltage and it changes the current. It's kind of like a cymatic wave. When you put salt on a plate and then you can tune it in, and the higher you tune it, it gets more complex structure to it. The same
Right.
thing. If you're going to change voltage and ramp it up and in a plasma electrified state in the sky, and we got really electrified skies like that, they would be running for dolmens in this stuff. The higher the charge goes, the more complex the shapes become. So, is this an intertransitionary type of image that we're looking at that they literally saw everywhere on the planet? It wouldn't be really close in, it would have been far out, like the entire planet could have witnessed this. So if you
Right.
saw that in the skies and it's transitioning and it's moving into changing into different things, depending on the sounds you're hearing around rocks cracking, rocks exploding, things bursting into flame, plasma tornadoes coming down, ripping through, and then in the clear you could see this thing off in a horizon going white, probably because it would be so highly electrified. Like in a
Right.
transition on that, but it's flipping back and forth. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, how would we leave this as warnings for somebody else 30 years in the future, 10,000 years in the future? There's a lot of
Right.
things about religion that could be blended in. There you go. That's a perfect one. That's a definitely a transition. If you go to Sapphire, Safire, they call it a star in a jar. That is like quintessential on the face of those plasma orbs when they electrify them. You get all of those snap into a full glow, and then they start come out in concentric rings, and then they start to change in different things that we see on every single faces of rocks around the planet everywhere.
Right. Yeah, well, that's what's funny is
There,
you could go to Egypt, you could go to South America, you could come right here in the desert, but you're gonna find these
they're
step
the same one.
pyramids. Same step pyramid. And then here's this. You recognize the H block that's on Gobekli Tepe. It's in South America. Here it is right here. Very important symbol for some reason at the petroglyph sites. And in China, actually, I was talking to a lady that was talking about the petroglyphs there, and her theory is that this may be actually a Chinese glyph right here. Because they have the same shape there. And here's this guy, which you can find in South America. You see how that rock is broken right there at the top? I found that piece out there and put that back on top of that. It was lost in
No
the debris. So you
way.
could
You
see how you were
solid man
talking about.
saving our
Yeah.
archaeology, dude. But on the left there, that's a plasma
Yeah.
discharge rope right there, a Christmas tree rope, as they call it, that coming up on the left side.
Yeah, you could pick any of them. You could any of the Parat things, the Spotter Man, whatever you want. I'll find the glyph. It's right here at this site also. But it shows the question you were having: how would you pass on information over generations? And here's a rock I found with the word Roadrunner in 3 different probably stages. And around the different petroglyph sites, I've seen these stages. So this C looking thing is the eventual word that you find at all the other petroglyphs. But as you can see, someone was either showing someone the stages of how they got there, or they were showing what it meant actually. And all they use for the Roadrunner is this C shape, backward C shape as a tail, and you'll find that all over. And then I've also discovered, and you see if you look it to the right of this guy, there's a little weird door right there. You find that all over too behind the people.
But those
But
3 Roadrunners, that's a transition of plasma into different shapes and forms as well. It takes on more complex forms. It goes from possibly that C, and the more electrified it gets, it'll take that X cross shape. It's moving all the time too when it's doing this, is it's varying in its shapes.
oh, there you go.
Uh-huh.
There's Mr.
Squatta.
Squatterman. Yeah, well, my point was is that all of this is there, the same shapes. That shows you how old that people have traces of the older civilization. It's pre-Stone Age. The Stone Age came after some civilization because it was a relearning of everything. And that thing that you were talking about the seeds, that is exactly what is known to be happening with these some of these megalithic sites, especially in England and Scotland, as the locals would put their seeds under these rocks, and supposedly it would give them some kind of energetic power to grow better crops. They really believe that, and they were doing it for a period of time. But I think what happened was is after a while the magnetic field eventually went back to its normal state, and that no longer worked, so they abandoned those sites.
They would have. So imagine if your whole building fails and there's no way to turn the electric back on, would you live in a 47-story high rise?
Right.
No, no.
Not unless you like
Speaking from
eggs.
experience, I was living in Chengdu, and then I did lived up on the 47th floor, and then our electric went out, and had to walk up. I remember that one day the elevators didn't work, and I had to walk up and back down.
Yep, you just leave the windows open. In a couple weeks you'll have eggs.
Maybe.
All the birds will fly up there to the 47th floor and start laying
Ooh.
nests in your house. And you just get out there and get some omelets in the morning. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, it is 9:00. Do you know where
All
your
right.
children are?
Oh, wow, it's 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Please join us for the second hour right here, the Civilization Cycle podcast, coming at you live every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. We're going to take a quick break. Please support our sponsors. They support us. We think they're quality. That's why we're bringing them to you. And we're going to jump on the second hour. I'm going to bring you some slides talking about the possibilities of what people think about crypto and gold and silver moving into the future, rebounding off of this crash. And Ransom's going to bring us in with a couple more ancient history nuggets for the mind late night. So we'll see you then. Come on back. 2 and 2.
Pushed the wrong button.
Hey everyone, are you ready to grow your own fresh, delicious vegetables, herbs, and flowers this season? If you're looking for the highest quality heirloom and organic seeds, I've got the perfect company for you, True Leaf Market. They've been a trusted seed company since 1974, offering 3,000 types of non-GMO varieties, everything from classic heirloom tomatoes and peppers to rare herbs, microgreens, sprouting seeds, and beautiful flowers. All those seeds are open pollinated, pure, and perfect for home gardeners or anyone wanting healthy, flavorful produce without chemicals. What I love the most is their huge selection, fast shipping guarantees, plus options for bulk if you're going big. If you're excited to start your garden this year with real, authentic heirloom and organic seeds, click the link in the description box below to check out TrueLeafMarket.com. You won't regret it. Happy planting, and thank you for supporting the channel and this broadcast. Product you love, the 72-hour emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. Not only emergency food, but camping food, and you can prepare that through the week as well. 20 delicious just add water meals. Think about creamy mac and cheese, hearty chili, sweet oatmeal. 2,000 calories a day. You need the calories. You're going to need to think and move. And the mashed potatoes, easier to make than oats, and you can add your own flavors. Goes with anything. For less than a couple of takeout meals at a fast food restaurant, get real peace of mind. And a real question to ask, how long could your family eat without leaving home? My Patriot Supply, click on that link in the description box below. It helps the channel. Truth is hard to say and hard to hear. Most people choose silence. We choose to speak. Your support of our sponsor keeps the Civilization Cycle podcast on air and giving us the courage to keep digging. That link's in the description box below. This is not a toothpaste. It's a revolution for your teeth. Remineralize, strengthen teeth, all natural ingredients, essential oils, minerals, salts. Alpha Vedic Dental Solutions System. That's alphavedic.com/civilization. You know, we're always trying to bring you the best products here that we think will enhance your life, especially if supply chains break down further, or if there's some disruption in our lives here. It seems in the news more and more possible, but hey, who knows? Maybe it's a mind game. But what is not is keeping your dental health up. And not a lot of people are talking about this. We always see the storable foods. But what about dental care during these same emergency situations? Will your toothpaste eventually run out? Well, if it does, then what? So like I say, this whole micro gut biome is driven by your oral cavity first. So take a look at what they have, alphavedic.com/civilization. Every purchase you make helps keep our live radio show and podcast on air, bringing you more information just like this. alphavedic.com/civilization. That link is in the show notes below. And as always, I appreciate your valuable time and joining us in this ever and most important conversation as we move forward in our world.
Please remember to sign up for our show notes. With Civilization Cycle podcast, you can learn what to expect as society resets. Agriculture, economy, tech, and history all have mappable cycles, and these cycles affect every aspect of our lives. We can navigate the chaos and thrive together with up-to-date news and information. Also, if you like the content we have here on Civilization Cycle, think about fueling the discussions and the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Civilization Cycle. And thank you for all the support.
And welcome back for the second hour right here, the Civilization Cycle podcast live show every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, just snuggling back in the chair here to bring you another hour of just news to share and things to think about in this greater scheme of things that we've moved into. Now, the first hour we were talking a little bit about economy. We're going to come back to that. But trailing off, we ran out of time a little bit in this discussion about really how old are things that we've been told. Now, they're redating everything. At the same time, we're coming into this, well, extreme phase of all weather occurring on the planet and heat as well as cold. and massive floods, and the droughts are kicking off in Kenya again. I'm still trying to dive into that. I don't understand why, because they're getting an enormous amount of rainfall just literally across the border north up through the Horn there and up into Eritrea and Ethiopia and the Sudan. Just massive amounts of rain. But 50 miles that way, it's the drought, the biggest drought since the 1980s, and suddenly they care about the kids down there or whatever. But speaking of timelines here, world's oldest known rock art predates modern humans' entrance into Europe, and it was found in an Indonesian cave. So everything that we know is being redated right now, as well as the economy being reset. Our lives had been reset during COVID, right? We got the full reset at that point. A little bit of letdown because they can't put that much pressure on the human psyche for that long of a period of time. So you could breathe out again, but it seems like full throttle again. The economy is definitely being thrust in a different direction unanimously from all governments and financial institutions at the moment to make things cheaper for them to produce products and governments to procure, buy, hoard all of these metals that they need for their continuity of government because it's in too many private hands right now. So I would ask you the question, like Ransom and I were talking the first hour. They're redating the construction date of the pyramids to 18 to 20,000 years ago. They're redating and now telling you there was an advanced civilization connected globally 39,000 years ago. Here's another one. Now, the oldest rock art in the world is now even stretched back further in time. This one's 67,800 years old in Indonesia. Now, what are the chances that all these are being, they're all brought together in, well, just one fell swoop right now? Is there anything that I'm missing here? This is the rock art that we might have. So this hand stencil, now we're going back even a further 1,000 years than any evidence prior to. So this is Liang Mentenduno Cave in Sulawesi. Now, please remember, at that time during the Ice Age, from Sulawesi and parts of the Philippines, it was connected by land all the way through Singapore and all the way up into what is mainland Asia now. There was no, as we know it today, Indonesian archipelago. That was all land. That was all dry land, just one giant landmass. And you could literally see across the channel to Australia, and they were moving back and forth across there because it was such a small little, crossing to get over to Australia. Today, it's super dangerous, crazy currents. But back then, there were inland seas. It was a much more balanced kind of area than it is today. I encourage you to take a look at some of these Ice Age maps of the Indonesian area. It would surprise you. So as we go up to some of this prehistoric art, 66,000 years, and then I need to add another 1,000 years. And it's just been continuous dating on back. So when we get in 85,000 or 73,000-year-old rock art, here they are even going back 540,000 years. That takes us through at least 4 ice ages. The 10,000 years of warmth between those ice ages were the same. Anatomically the same. Our brains are the same. Everything's the same, except maybe the magnetic field might be different. Otherwise, we had 10,000 years each of those times to create something, invent something, create technology, make technology. Where is it? Now, see, if we keep going on the same track here, redating everything older and older and older, eventually we're going to bump straight into that last 10,000 years of warmth in the more, I wouldn't even call it a Holocene, but whatever they term that as, in between the last ice age of 10,000 years of warmth. We're getting pushed back to that. They're leading us to that point. They're leading us to the point where we're eventually going to have this discussion of what did those people at 118,000 years ago, what did they do? What did they make? Or did they find it already under the ice somewhere in Antarctica and they're about to bring it out to us? So they need to take history back further. Because in the first hour, we were talking about Earth's crustal displacement and some of these events. If we went into a zero magnetic field, the crust could slip across the mantle. Previously, Antarctica was on the equator. So, it's happened at least once, maybe even twice if you count the Arctic with all of the animals smashed in and these massive amounts of, debris up there. That could have been a cataclysm itself and just water. but they also found tropical fossils in the Arctic. So that means the planet had to at least be 90 degrees off, maybe twice. Now, how do you, you'd have to, the Arctic and Antarctica would have to have flipped 90 degrees to be on the equator on both of those. So Arctic's on the equator, Antarctica's on the equator. And then somehow it shifts and then they're both in the Arctic now. But that's just fossil record and like ice core drilling, and they coming up with all these fossils everywhere. So, what is it, Ransom, to come on to the second hour here? What do you think it is about them with all these news articles in the media, mainstream media, acknowledging and telling us full steam ahead? We need to redate everything now.
Well, a lot of it's because of genetic research says that most of what they've been saying is just complete garbage. You could go get a cheap DNA test and start looking at the dates in which your haptypes came upon the earth, and you'll find out that a lot of the haptypes are older than when people were supposed to be where they're at. In other words, so they existed a long time before that. So, like, I don't know. Here, I think I can share this. I'll give you an example. This is just part of my hobby here that I'm doing on my own DNA, but it, it spreads out to everybody. Let's see here. All right. All right. So here's my mother's haptype right here. So this is mitochondrial DNA map, and it goes back into time. But what they don't tell you is they have this little line in Africa. There's no bodies represented with these haptypes. This is estimated. This is imagined. There's no there's no physical evidence that goes along with this. However, right around here in the Middle East, you do start getting haptypes where you start finding bodies. So we know people were there. And we know that Cro-Magnon just kind of showed up probably about 70,000 years ago, right here in the Mediterranean. And all of the Cro-Mag bodies are found along the coast of North Africa, nowhere in anywhere below the Sahara, but in North Africa. The Ganj people that were supposed to be directly descended from them lived out here on these islands by themselves until the Spanish killed them. And all of these bodies that they're trying to say were Cro-Magnon were in the 40 to 50,000 year range, but we know that they were there, but they just show up from nowhere. There's no bodies before that. Now, Neanderthals around here for 450,000 years living there. Exactly the same. He didn't change. His skull didn't change. Nothing changed. Stayed the same. Over here in Asia, we have Denisovan. We know that they were probably around for 300,000 or more years. Matter of fact, there's footprints from one that's dated at 330,000 years. And they just were there. They were living in, we don't know that their morphology, because we don't really have bones from them, except for one example of a skull from China that the guy hid in the well, and then later they DNA tested that and matched it to the mystery DNA that was in the human genome. And then, of course, there's the cave in Siberia up here, where we get the word Denisovan from, because there was a hermit that lived in the cave named Denis. That's where we found the little finger bone and all of that, and first discovered the species. But now we know that we're just a hybrid species everywhere. There is no example of a original Homo sapien anywhere on the planet. Every single human today is a hybrid of multiple different hominids that went extinct. But the dating right here, so like if I switch over to my male haptype, look where it says that I'm back at 40,000 years ago, and 50,000 years ago is back here in China. And this is the R1B line that you get lactose tolerance, blue eyes probably, and some other things, that genes that carry that. But if you go back, it goes back to the Middle East. It goes back right about here. You see this green line? There's no bodies to represent the alleged DNA before this at all. So they just link you to imaginary stuff back here. And at that time period, you see the haptypes explode. It goes from F over here. And this A and Y is when we split from Neanderthal and Denisovan around that time. So that's about 750,000 years ago. So what I'm saying is human beings, as you know them today, most likely existed for hundreds of thousands of years before they even say they existed. And that's because the area of land that they lived is probably submerged in the ocean now. And that's why they showed up in the fossil record all of a sudden, and completely modern, no different than a European today. The Cro-Magnon guy just shows up. He's there. And then he starts spreading everywhere, mixing with everybody. And this goes back into times. You're telling me that none of these people back then were building stuff, and farming animals. All of it was happening. It just got destroyed, and then we started over. And then they came up with these ideas to kind of keep people from realizing that everyone is in the same family tree. Like the human history belongs to everybody, but they want to tribalize it where people think that it belongs to them, or it's a whole thing. And now they're trying to use this politically, because they're about to have to redo all of history. Everybody's books are going to have to get rewritten. Either that, or they put the genetics back in the bottle, and that's over.
We've come too far with technology for people to accept that doesn't work any longer.
Right. Oh, wrong guy. Wrong window. I'm sorry, David.
Turn me back on,
I'm
man.
sorry.
Think about our own. This is the mind experiment of what happened then. So sea levels rose 400 feet. If in a modern world, if the sea levels rose 400 feet, there would be nothing left of our modern world, barely,
No.
except some ski resort towns, and maybe those would become the new cities.
Right.
We'd have to find new ports, obviously. We'd have to find new ports coming in, gorges that filled up. There would be nothing left of our remnant. There would be nothing, a remnant at best of our civilization, because everything, even the skyscrapers, after a while in New York, would just get all rusty from beneath and corroded, and then they would just fall into the ocean and decay, because glass and metal, doesn't stand up very well to waves, but it's not very corrosion resistant if it wasn't built with some alloy metal to be corrosion resistant. Most buildings aren't meant to weather, salt water, immersion for centuries on end. Like, that would just crumble into nothing, So take it into that context. So, everything would disappear. As I was saying, Asia was one, Indonesia was a landmass itself. Now it's just thousands of islands.
Right. And we know that even right there's a good area to talk about. We'll get back to this economy as far as anthropology and the history of humans, because we got the Hobbit Man, we got all kinds of stuff was going on over there that has nothing to do with us. We're kind of centric to the recent history as far as our importance in the world. But there literally was all kinds of stuff going on, and different empires of people that weren't even us, that don't even exist anymore. I recently read a paper about there's a Saharan civilization. I don't mean sub-Saharan or Europe or anywhere. They were their own branch of people that lived within the Sahara. They're probably the ones that put the petroglyphs there of all of the wetland animals that's all over the Sahara now that they're finding. But this group of people lived there for about 60,000 years straight, and then just disappeared. And there is no, humans today representing them. But they existed. They're just gone to time. And this is something scientists thought no one could have ever lived in the Sahara region, but they did. And for 60,000 years, they lived there before they went extinct. They were somewhat related, probably, to the people of the Levant and sub-Saharan Africans, and they were their own segregated people. You imagine the history and languages and all of that stuff just lost to them because whatever happened in the Sahara, and that may later get linked to this big flood that went over North Africa.
Yeah, it could do. And I was trying to bring something up here for you since you were talking, and show that last little distribution coming up through Europe. And this is what Europe looked like. As you can see, England, UK, Scotland, Wales, that was all connected to the mainland. Look how much extra land there is. So they say they did find a huge amount of habitation out in the plateau that you see there, just between England and coming over toward Europe there, mainland Europe now.
Right.
But think about the fjords coming all the way in, where sea ice probably would have clogged that up. But everything's very much smaller in terms of ocean size. And what you were talking about in the beginning of the show, see the Black Sea there. I mean, that's all dammed up, completely dammed up.
Yeah, that wouldn't have even been there. That's inaccurate.
Okay. Well, we'll come
I mean,
down to
just
more.
the Black Sea part, it wouldn't have been there because it was dry in there.
Were they maybe making reference of it? Well, okay. So here's an interesting one, too. Now, here's where Taiwan is, and mainland China is over here now. So there's a strait in between here. It's about 90 miles wide of just ocean,
Right.
ferocious currents, heavy winds, and right,
Wow.
take some different
Hold
kind
on.
of underwater measuring and side scanning sonar and thing. They
You
found
left us.
complex sort of circular under there, but fishermen kept getting routinely snagged on this thing. So this used to be able to walk from uh, Taiwan over to China, but again, look at Japan too. There was barely just anything separating Japan and Korea,
Right.
and that Kamchatka Peninsula is totally connected to Japan as well.
You cut
And
off
there's
for a
other
minute.
islands going off in the north.
You cut off for a minute, but I think you were talking about probably the structures that are out there in the ocean that were. I mean, this is land on this map, but now it's
Yep.
ocean, and
Now it's
then
ocean.
they have those platforms, right? The big old platform. Is that what you were talking about?
Yep, sure is. Yeah, fishermen always are snagging their nets on those things. And here's the one I really wanted to get at. So this
There
is
it
what is
is.
considered Indonesia right now. It's not. See how many Kilimantan also was connected to this. So
Right.
just how Indonesia is that boundary to the very bottom there with those what you see the islands or what the volcano ridges sticking up. That's the Indonesian islands. The
And
rest of it is well land connected. And if you come all the way over, then all you do is just jump right over to Australia. And
Right.
Australia in itself. So we're going to go to the bottom quadrant here to the, let's say, to the southeast. Then look how much of a land mass was extending off of Australia. So you wouldn't have to cross in the open ocean area like today. You could have ridden that thing up toward Erie and China and popped off Papua New Guinea, and then it popped right off there because this is the edge of Papua New Guinea or Erie and China. You could just go over on an easy, inland route and then get over there and then think about how much land there was. All this is submerged now.
Yeah, and if there was cities, they would have been at sea level, at the
Yep.
edge of that, all of it,
Yeah, right at these
everywhere
edges
around
that
the
would have
world.
been enveloped first or submerged first.
And you exactly find that when you go over to India. There's sunken cities all off the coast.
Oh, yeah.
They're
Unfortunately, they don't
gone.
have any part of India, but here, even just North America, look how much larger Florida is in the Bahamas.
Right.
And the Yucatan's sticking out too, but I don't know why they didn't color it in. So, yeah, you're right. Some of these maps are not exactly correct, but gives you an indication of, I think they're trying to show the continental shelf on what a continental shelf would have been at that time going further out. So imagine a time that could have been, they call it snowball Earth, where those continental shelves could have been even 200 feet lower than the last 400 feet lower. What if the sea levels were 800 feet lower?
Yeah, and you want to also think about this. Um, During those times, you would have had a much shallower sea out there on some of the parts because the sea level was down, and it would have been a totally different fishing arrangement and an arrangement of where people were living based on the animals, what the animals were doing compared to the way that the land was. And that's pretty obvious. And it's funny because those maps should be the maps that you use to go find all the lost cities. I mean, literally, we know they're going to be at the mouth of rivers. We know that they're going to be on the shore, the ancient shores. And they just barely started getting around to, saying that, yes, okay, there's like 150 sunken cities in the Mediterranean. And you have to think to yourself right then, if they're in the Mediterranean, they're everywhere. Everywhere there was civilization, their cities off the coast. If they were there, they're still there somewhere.
Yeah, no, I don't know how many people really, because even talking about Florida, like the cities would have been super far out past the Bahama Bank, right? So that's why a lot of people, local fishermen, aren't getting into those cities right there because they would have been at the coastline, which was way literally at the edge of the continental shelf right now. A lot of people don't have 400, they can't get down 400 feet with some sort of side scanning sonar or something to be able to look for that. I have heard that our US Navy has mapped every one of those cities and knows exactly where every single one is. They've mapped every square inch of the ocean bottom across the entire planet, and
I
they have
bet they
full
have.
maps of where all those cities are. And
I
they have
bet
been
they have.
pulling relics from these cities. Underwater excavation and archaeology goes on.
I
Like we
mean,
have
you
some
think
really good deep water technology for not only drilling, but submarines and all types of different habitats that can be done for long duration stays. So imagine you pull up, you find a city 400 feet deep, and they find an entrance into it. Hell, there's still air pockets in there. You know, you bring your own air source, pop some in there, and then you could live under there, and then you got to decompress after you come back out. But think about what would be found inside some of those cities that were discovered that were the 400-foot level going back. What kind of tech would they have had? It would be something very different than our own tech. Like we envision it being a computer or something, but what if it was like Sleestack Con where they're actually using crystals? That was based off an Earth's distributed energy grid, which would be the obelisks, the different tops of cathedral, different things. But that is the more modern version of the tech versus what it was using perhaps mountains sculpted themselves. I've been wanting to go to Visilco in Bosnia myself to go see the Bosnian pyramid. That's on my bucket list, hopefully this next year or even this year coming up, Visilco, to see that. I mean, what
right.
if they use natural formations for their energy distribution system and somehow able to harness that? Because perhaps gravity, not gravity, but the way they were able to, move electrons around to make things more weightless. Like they could redistribute the molecules and atoms within a substance to be able to move it, harmonize it, turn it into some sort of slurry that could be formed way different than we do it now. Like we take it from one place to another, but imagine if you had the technology to form that on site. And this is where you talk about down in South America, you find all this, what seems like a substrate poured into versus something that was chiseled out and fitted together. It seems like it was poured on site, fit in place, but what if he didn't need to really go far? He just took the working minerals around there and literally melted them there and just moved them a foot or two and put them into a casting. That I'm thinking that's the more the direction it went with harmonics, frequency, resonance, and they were able to deconstruct.
They just put it on their convection stove, man.
Yeah. Is that the Barbie convection oven, the little thing you cook your little cakes in there?
Right, and it heats it all up.
Heats it
Magic,
all up.
man. No, I think you're absolutely right, and we use crystal technology today, so there's no reason to think that they couldn't have done that. And when you were talking about all that stuff, it's not like the Russia, China, or the U.S. government, if they so stumbled upon Atlantis and they realized, oh crap, this is technological, that they were going to tell anybody about it. They're not going to tell nobody. They're going to sift through it themselves. It's going to be top secret. It would be more secret than aliens.
Well, that disruptive technology brings us into a whole different realm there. I mean, how many inventors over the last, even say 80 years, have been killed for bringing disruptive technologies to us, our planet, where we wouldn't need, speaking of green, we wouldn't even need the green. Like that would be a useless step, as much as a useless step of putting up copper wires around our planet when we could have gone directly to Nikola Tesla and we could have skipped the whole copper wiring of the planet thing, unless there's whole different realms reasons that they might want to have done that besides just the money.
Right.
Control of citizenry and humanity. Got to pay for play. You got to pay to live on the prison here.
I was just thinking how many people, how
Oh,
many of the
dude,
homeless take.
we could grill those up. Speaking of Barbie oven, like cooking cakes and stuff, we could grill those. We could grill those iguana up there. I'm totally dead serious. Iguana is supposed to be amazing meat for grilling. No BS assessment. I've heard it a million times. People that live in
Right.
Florida, they grill them all the time.
That's why I was wondering if the homeless and people didn't just get out there and get those. And I was thinking, you probably wouldn't get the snakes because they'd be at the bottom of the water hiding from the cold. But these things are dropping out of the trees that could just be free meat given to the, even the government could take it over it. I don't advocate for that, but even the government could take it over and feed the homeless with the iguana, especially if they started including in the meat all the species that don't belong there in the first place.
Yeah, because I watch a fair few of those videos about these hunters that go down, and there's people that have hunting licenses, and government pays them to remove these pests out of there. They're just atrociously overwhelming for the natural ecosystem, like the pythons that are down there. There's 2 or 3 different variety now. You got like Gila monsters that are down there that have been let go that are really taking over. They're the Gila monster that you buy as a pet. These things are getting outrageously crazy. And the iguanas, like people got all these types of license to go hunt this. And I like watching the guys that are pulling out these like 16, 15, 12, 18-foot pythons, and they get paid by the foot. Now, there's a couple chefs down there that they're fully devoting their time to try to make python recipes, right? So there's also involved a culinary aspect to it as well. So if you watch all, just look for like Florida snake hunters, Florida iguana hunters, you'll be baffled at like some of these snakes are like that thick at the head, and they're trying to grab on. Dude, people always getting bitten, trying to jump on them and whatnot, but it's just fascinating. And I've seen these anaconda hunters down in the Amazon, and they tag them for release, so they're not really there to hunt them, but they need to incapacitate them the same way, like jump behind the head. But those things are like, oh sheesh, they're like 50, they're a good 25. There's some bigger 28 footers that they have, and like, man, that's a rough one. They're different
Well,
too. They're just girthier than like a little skinny python or boa or something.
I'll eat me a rattlesnake, man, if I have to. Snake's not that bad. I've had it before.
Have you eaten rattlesnake?
Yeah.
What do you think? Give me the describe. Describe it. Be the food show for me
Chicken.
here.
Chicken with a lot of bones in it. It's like a cross between chicken and fish. It's really greasy though, like pork. It's weird. I would think those pythons would be more moist and delicious because they live in a wet environment with all that bigger muscle. I mean, that would be like putting some ribs up there on the grill. I thought you would find this interesting because we're always talking about the entities that maybe be here. Maybe they're not alien. I'm always talking about AI and how they're trying to put AI in us or us in the AI. And here's the future as predicted. New site lets AI rent your body. Robots need your body. We don't need them. We don't need the robots anymore. We'll just sell out our bodies. This is like carbon, what's that show, Carbon Fiber, where people are renting out bodies because they're already dead but they live on a little disc, so you get to load it into people that are still alive. That's this. We're here.
Dark side of the machine.
And of course they want to use you because it's the
So
next
how do you
phase
how do
of
you do that? Wait a
jobs.
second. So walk me through that. How does an AI rent your? What do you?
Let's see here, because just the headline by itself is enough for me to go, there it is. Yeah, it says the machines are just coming for your jobs, which I was about to get to without even reading it. As they want your bodies as well. That's the least of the. Yeah, this is one of those fancy articles, so it'll take a long time to get in there. 73,000 rentable meat wads through only 83 profiles were visible. So they want to.
Fancy, you got to be a speed reader.
Yeah, they want you to do, they could do OnlyFans or you could
They
do
call you a
anything.
meat wad. Did you see that word there? You're a meat wad. Just go under where it said CEO, and they classify you as a
Yeah,
meat wad.
you could be a CEO of an AI startup. All you have to do is just let the AI take control of your body and tell you. See, this isn't going to be a direct interface yet. They'll just send you an email right now and tell you what the AI wants you to do. But then it becomes direct. Meat wads, dude. That's what they think of us. Autonomous task bots. They're using us for the drone, us for the robot. How about instead of we inventing
Yeah, empty
robots,
container. I'm saying, but
the robots just tell us what to do and use us as the drone? We're autonomous drones. We can decide stuff, the little tasks. The AI just tells us what to do to get to its goal. And then, I was just getting there because that could be your new job since all of the other jobs are leaving. The AI's apocalyptic jobs prophecy is about to become a reality. Weirdly, at the same time as all of the other bubbles are popping, you're going to see the dollar pop and the Bitcoin pop and the silver pop for a little while. But don't worry about the silver; it'll go back up. Who knows about the Bitcoin? They could be just doing that so that they could pump in a lot more money. So then it'll go up again on another peak. And speaking of the world, we're all changing. Mysterious Dorito shaped aircraft spotted flying at night over Area 51. Something interesting here. But guess
Oh, that's
what?
a TRB
It's not just
71, isn't it?
right. And they're not just flying over there. I saw one over Holloman Air Force Base, really high altitude last night. I was like, what is that? I kept seeing these three flashing lights, and it did have a green and a red on it. And it was way up there, high altitude, and it just came down and did a corkscrew back down. They're about to unveil totally the next generation in all the toys that they're going to be playing with. As everyone's getting laid off and they're messing with the money, layoffs. Everywhere's a layoff. Americans are unretiring to keep up with the cost of living. Also, why? Because their food keeps going up, their utilities keep going up. It doesn't matter who gets in office, but don't worry. Soon they'll offer you the AI president that will promise to bring prices down, and you can be cool. And if you don't like it, you can surrender to the autonomous gun robot that'll just roll up at your house and tell you, you know what, you don't want to pay your taxes? Excuse me? This will be the next Civil War. You know, all those states trying to come up with laws real quick. You better do it, or the IRS will be sending these things to your door. This is a bunch of soldiers that we're not going to show it because, you know, YouTube or whatever, but a bunch of soldiers giving up when they realize they're out of ammo, and this giant robot's rolled up that can kill them, which I said was coming, right? And
You
guess what?
did. You were saying that. I believed you.
And
I'm
now they're
not
telling.
happy about believing you. I just believe you.
Somebody asked the question earlier about the AIs in space. The AIs are going to go to Mars. The AI is going to have a base on the moon. The AI is going to get to leave the solar system. But you, not you. You're going to stay down here. And not only are you going to stay down here, that's going to be off limits up there. And besides, you can't go up there. You can't even make babies in other places anyway. They're already telling you. The most you're going to get is low Earth orbit as a tourist.
Elysium, man. Elysium. Hey, we got a couple comments here on Buy Me a Coffee.
All right.
Elysium is where we're going. All right, so here we go. Catherine Barlow, thank you for the double espressos here. What do you think about Einstein being behind Bitcoin and now it's dumping? I know it halves in 2028 and it always drops before the halving.
Well, Einstein was a smart guy.
Einstein is a very smart cat. Yes, he is. Good wording on that. This particular cycle, everybody was mind melded into believing that because governments were talking about strategic Bitcoin reserves, all these companies were saying Bitcoin treasury, etc. All banks are offering it to their customers now, apparently after another couple more weeks or a month, or almost every single bank is going to house and be a custodian for all crypto assets. Everybody believed that it was going to go up. Now this, because it wasn't just individual driven, that the cycle was going to be a little bit different anyway, that nobody expected the news to get knocked out of it based on the new information. Maybe these emails are true, maybe they're not. They're still trying to confirm, are these emails true? Because if they are, you could expect things to drop down. But is it a coordinated effort? Because I just can't believe that we didn't look through all these documents here 3 million and go, do you know what? If we do this, this could create a national emergency and collapse our economy because people are going to lose faith in the system. But they still released everything, and they really focused in on, where's the money? Follow the money. The money is created by somebody. It was going to be a strange kind of peak coming into this time anyway. So a lot of people thought it was, they kept pushing 140, 170, 140, 170,000, and then it's going to peak. I mean, that was a unanimous push. And it dropped off at like 126, let's say 125,000 max. and it just crashed. It's cratered. It's below 50% of that peak. But remember, most of these cycle trough, as Ransom likes to say, well, there's a trough, man. It's usually 80% down from the all-time high. So if we're at 125 minus 80%, where does it take us? Probably around somewhere around 35 to $40,000. And then after that, most people are predicting $1 million by 2030. They're unanimous on this. So the shakeout comes now. Does it go close to zero and come back from the dead? I don't know. But I do have something for you here. Speaking of food and whatnot, the wheat and gold index, because Ransom last week had the cattle to gold index. So this is bushels of wheat compared to an ounce of gold. So the higher this goes means the cheaper the wheat is and the more expensive the gold is. And it's on a 42 to 44 year peak. Where do we sit on this right now? Pretty much. We are going to be coming off this peak, meaning the price of wheat is going to get much, much, much more expensive if it follows the traditional cycle. So when you look at Tambora way over back in 1815, for an ounce of gold, you only got what, 3 or 4 bushels of wheat? That was nearly a parity of 1-to-1 almost. It's kind of like the gold silver ratio. It got down in the low 40s and then it skyrocketed back up above 60 something now with the crashes happening. But now think about, just put it in context. That is trending at around 450 bushels of wheat for an ounce of gold. Imagine if that just goes in half and it comes down to 200 bushels of wheat for an ounce of gold. What do you think the price of our food will be? Now, this is just following in context here of the regular 42 to 44 year cycle peak. We're coming off of that. So with the gold prices rising, your food's going to get more expensive based on the gold wheat ratio. And as you saw last week, rightly so, I think I might even have this one. No, I don't have. I thought I had pulled up the gold to beef ratio that you had. But so here, and then I'll share this one with you. So they're trying to say that if you're comparing gold to Bitcoin, it's like comparing an elephant to a mouse. Two different sets of idiosyncratic market forces affecting market price in the short term, but on the longer term narrative, I think they remain quite similar. Meaning, we're going to throw everything out in the news we can to get you to buy one or the other. So right now it's a fire sale happening across everything. So there's nothing that's holding value. It's all dropping in unison. So where do you go? You might sell one and keep the other. You might get afraid and sell one and keep the other. That's what governments are wanting to do. Corporations and banks and finance side, central banks and the whole way down want you to part with your crypto, specifically Bitcoin. They would love to pick it up for 35 and then they'll run it to $1 million. And then, gee, that's a, what would you call that? A 30X on that?
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is what it's kind of moving to through the ecosystem today. Let's drop in on this Yahoo Finance for a momento.
Oh, all right.
Retail traders lashed out by crypto rout. But again, keep it in context. Every single bank, every single company, every single government is super deep into the crypto. So is it just going to stop and go away? I don't know. It all kind of depends on, are these emails real or not real? Because they could be. A couple of them have found out to be fakes so far when they specifically use the word Satoshi. That was found out to be a fake one. It was not in the whole list, but somebody just threw it in there, made their own, and added it to the queue and said, look, this one says it was Satoshi, but perhaps it's not. Well, now, again, I was talking about Japan earlier. They're in a world of hurt. They're going to have to sell all their treasury bonds to try to cover, or they're going to have to print money. Neither of them is very good because, when There's just bad. There's only two worse choices for Japan at the moment. So that's what happens there. Let me see what else do I got here for you. On the here's the Hamburgs. I don't know if you've heard of this one before. It charts it on a log scale. So anytime this is a formula, and they call it a Hindenburg. Are you familiar with the Hindenburg, the explosion hydrogen aircraft?
Yeah.
This is what these signals show when they're coming into points where projected market declines are going to happen. If they get over 6 signals, usually something's going to happen. Usually 5 to 6. If you get to an 8 or a 7, there's something large going on. So we just had a 5 signal and a 3 signal. So where do we go from here? It's just information that's been gleaned through the past. Now, if you want to look at it in a different kind of scale, anytime these spikes occur, you either get some sort of very small downtrend, or when they get up near the line, the best way to describe it, when they get up above 8 on their scale here, that usually signifies some larger decline, especially when it actually touches that. It's going back to 1995, so you get a decline. This was close, but it didn't manifest, so it's not exactly perfect on their trajectories, but this one hit 1, 2, 3 in a row. This one is a slight decline, but here's where we sit. This thing is gaining traction, going up, up, and up. And have we rolled over already to where this is declining, and this will continue to increase? Because they're looking on a 6-month back period, so they can't. That's where we sit now. So they're back still in at the end of 2025. You have to have the paid subscription to see where the red line is currently. So I'm just going to say we are definitely into a resetting period here where the traditional things that would hold value are not holding value. Like, you can't tell me silver drops 40% since Friday. Bitcoin rips off from 80s down into it might end up in the 50s tonight. And there's no safe place to go to. Stocks got battered. All the earnings calls with all these tech companies and the AI companies just missed. And people had there's just a tremendous amount going on. Like, there's nowhere to park your money that's safe right now.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with current events. That's why you saw a big dip and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on, like you said. And there's a bunch of other emails that are out there that are affecting things going up and things going down also. I won't mention about the Einstein emails too much, but you also had this happen on Thursday. The Chinese contract at the Panama Canal ruled unconstitutional and win for Trump's done row doctrine. In other words, we've claimed ownership of the Panama Canal, just like the canal, just like we were talking about that they were going to do, that they have to do, because we're going to end up in a conflict soon. And at the same time, you see the Bitcoin, sell off and the price dip, and then
Yeah,
you got
Amazon's down actually 15%. That's an old headline. 15
right.
down. So, like, as we go through today and tomorrow, it's just going to be just tremendous. And we're coming into a Friday. So this is the question. If it gets bad enough, and if there's so much happening, would they call a banking holiday this weekend?
They could do stuff like that, and we're expecting also, for them to decide whether or not they're going to open or close the government as well. This
Still,
is
I thought
just
they'd resolved that. I thought it was already passed, and they were.
well, that all depends on what's happening with the rioters and different things. That's what I'm saying. Everything's a little spaghettied all together on which way people are going. But this is just another indication of stuff.
Yeah, I'm going
I
to make
can't
you
talk.
big. I want to see that. Can you pull that article? I was really interested in that green lights Chinese car one there.
Yeah, and so here's another big economic move by China right next door to us. And we're having little issues on and off with Canada, but they're going down the road to be in a totally different kind of country there, and we all know what that's called. But they are making some big partners there, and we are going to have a conflict here. I mean, and you were talking about earlier. This is just a side note about people going nuts. This is like the 5th article I saw like this of people stabbing each other over dumb stuff like taking a bite out of a hamburger or stealing the last sticky bun. You got people trying to blame the wokes for the power outages and not the weather there. And although I dislike the wokies, It's not really their fault that our government hasn't really planned ahead for any kind of catastrophes for a long time,
No
and
way. I
various other
can address
factors.
the no, Ransom. I hate to cut you off. I can address the Nashville one because that's all in our news right here, right now.
Right.
Now, the line crews that were out there, they forced them to go through 100 hours of DEI training. Yeah, no kidding. Like if you wanted to get on a line crew, you had to go through this specific training, and it totaled, in addition to some of the actual electrical training, uh, you had to go through 100 hours of DEI courses. And this is what they're talking about. There's even senators talking about this on what a waste it was.
Well,
Country music stars are in it. Like, we still don't have power, man. We people don't. It's been 2 weeks plus, and there's still people without power in Nashville, which is absolutely like ridiculous. That, and again, the county wants to only repair everything themselves. They don't want to bring in outside people to help. So this is where it gets kind of weird, is the unions that were there, they do have the help just waiting there in parking lots with all these repair crews coming in. But the local county government is like, nah, we're going to use our union people, nobody else. And they're like, we only got, like, let's say 50 on staff. We got 500 other people waiting there to go to work. Nope, we're only going to use our union people in our county. This is why this is not getting fixed, and they force them through that training as well.
yeah.
So,
Well, my only point is they
well,
didn't have to start
that training that was required for them to even be considered to be a lineman, you had to go through this training.
right. So what my point is it's not really woke. It's the government deciding what happens and who gets to fix what. Right. Um, they don't need that training, and why would you have to all of a sudden, right when it starts snowing, have to do the training in order to get out there to deal with the emergency? And you said it yourself there. That's what it was all about. Is they wanted to control who was actually getting out there and fixing stuff.
Right,
And
but
this,
the people are still waiting there just on the peripheries around Davidson County to try to get in there to fix everything, but they won't let them in to fix.
right.
That's the whole thing that's infuriating about it. You got thousands of people waiting to go in and fix these line crews and thing, but they just won't give them the green light or the funds to go in and help their local county crews. This sickening, and people are just getting so frustrated. They're like, we're not paying our power bills, we're not paying our taxes. They're on a full-on revolt where power companies are like, we're out of power. Our pipes busted, everything. We're not paying anything. You actually owe us money because you had the ability to repair everything in the first few days and you strung it out for a week. And we went through another freeze again. It's been like 24, 25 degrees again. And, a
Maybe
lot of people didn't have power for such a long time, and inside of their homes in the 30s. They got
maybe
busted pipes everywhere, and electric companies like, not our fault. We tried the best we could. And they're like, no, we're suing you now. So there's a huge class action lawsuit against the local electric company there and the county officials there themselves. Not only they're going straight for their pocketbooks. It's a civil suit against that for.
maybe that's what
So,
happened in Helene, right? They probably made all those FEMA guys go take 100 hours of DEI training before they could go out and help people. That's why they were busy.
yeah, a lot of the guys weren't allowed to fly there because that was just over, I mean, literally over here on the mountains for us. So helicopter, like private helicopter crew or dudes, ladies, whatever, pilots who were taking people on, hey, let's go on a helicopter ride. You can photograph the mountains kind of thing. Like, we wanted to run up and rescue people up, and the FAA put us, no, totally closed the airspace. Wouldn't even let them fly in to rescue people on their own dime with their own fuel. They just closed it all up. Well, you might interfere with the drones that are going up there. Took them 2 weeks to get drones flying up and get operators up there. The FEMA people weren't allowed. The FEMA people set up in like parking lots way hella down, like in a middle of a mall. When the mountains were flooded, you're 40 miles away from where anything was damaged. You expect those people to get out of their houses 40 miles away and make their way down to your set up cushy, let's have coffee spot in the middle of a mall somewhere next to a movie theater? Like, please.
Well, you
So
won't be on your land then if
yeah,
you're
you won't
down
be on
there.
your land.
That's what most of that's about.
Yeah, they still
Um,
have 4,000 missing people up there. The numbers you were given are just atrociously low. There's still
right.
more than 4,000 people missing.
But
Oh, there's 40
you know,
people.
we're
Like times
we're
100. It's like China style there.
we're definitely that's a little microcosm of the reset on everything, and they're showing us this thing. They're not going to back off of this. It's just the question is which generation is going to have to deal with it as far as physically. Um, they're pushing this Russia thing until the end because they got it. It seems like Europe has been given up. They want it to civil war out or go to war with Russia, and then you got our own stuff going on where we're building up out there. But I thought this was the most interesting thing in the news right here. If this comes to it, now this is an AI
Yeah, I know. Huh?
uh, thing, but if they're not lying and they actually have this, which is basically a giant drone that shoots out, jets, probably AI controlled, and a bunch of other drones in any war. So that this is going to be the face of it. It's just and meanwhile, over here in the U.S., you just got a geyser of
Yeah,
poop coming
imagine
out
a
of the
giant.
water in the
No,
Potomac.
we have the engines to be able to accomplish. They're not going to be fighter jets like we can, or fighter jets. But what if they're unmanned, smaller aerial drones that have some serious power on them?
Right.
That same, flares and all these types of things, and ordnance on them, and
And this goes back to
anti-aircraft,
the TRB thing,
protection, and this sort of thing.
TR3B
Like,
thing, right?
what if you had 50 drones, 150 missiles or something? Hmm.
Yeah, it would be
Those things
devastating.
would be
And
formidable. I
and
mean, you could knock. That's a pretty big target, though.
right, but this is what we're about to see, and that's what I was bringing up the TR3B thing at the Area 51 is we're about to unveil all this stuff, and the fact that I'm pretty sure that I saw one over Holloman tells me we're real close to it because every project from Area 51, from the SR-71 Blackbird all the way up to the newer FY-22 and FY what is it 24 or whatever the other thing is, they were all over here at Holloman first, and so was the drone program. And in fact, they're increasing that. And whenever you got an area that's making stuff like laser technology, particle weapons, the missile site, and then you're also next to the biggest infantry base and concentration of migrant facilities, um, all kinds of stuff. I saw this thing on the interwebs about how many of these migrant centers just happen to be on the railroads and stuff. And it was kind of, kind of not truthful in a way because if you zoomed in on the maps, they weren't actually near the railroad tracks. However, that being said, down here in the Southwest, right next to all of this military components and stuff, it is on the railroad tracks. And um, that's because they want to be able to move people around easily. But the reason it's there is so that we can move our infantry, AI, whatever it is, loaded on ships in the Texas coast and move it on out into the ocean
You got to
or
think also
California.
with the propulsion systems here. They're used to trying to get you that it's a jet engine. What if it's
No.
electric gravitics and it's what do you consider weightless travel, or those things that Tesla had talked about? And the electric gravitics programs through the U.S. government. I guess Dr. Brown would have been a good one to talk about. And there's been a fair few others. There's a huge amount of books on electric gravitics and weightless travel and plasma edge. We're already using this on some of our own aircraft now, where they're putting a plasma edge out, so you're not actually cutting through air. You're creating a field in front of that penetrates through. It's just a huge amount of things going on there. The tech that is 50 years ahead of where we sit right now,
Right.
easily.
But we're going through these technological advancements, and yet, you get what you expect to come out of Washington. You see this poop water flooding into the
Gulf
Potomac.
America is going to go into the America Gulf. It
Yeah.
follows down.
And then think about this psychological warfare here. We're on the 250th anniversary of the United States, and just so happens that the Patriots and the left coast are going to play the Super Bowl, which is going to get certain fans in one direction, certain fans in another. And sports is one of the easiest things to make people lose their shit over. Look at all the times they riot after games. Um, this is what tells me if the digital soup kitchen goes down, we'll see real riots. Not because some lady had a problem, or because of the other guy, and you can have your views on that. But do you really want to see this manufactured civil war take place while the elite in the background, and I'm talking about the real elite, you were talking about it a minute ago. It's all in the same direction. Einstein's list came out with a lot of stuff about some tech moguls and tech giants who just happen to be losing a lot of money right now. Do you think that's planned, or do you think maybe people are just moving their money around because the public's view of the elite is changing day by day? And you would expect, just like on a sci-fi movie, that the most sinister people you could think of invest in things like biotech, transhumanism, DNA, and their buddies might be into making mRNA technology or whatever. And I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. But if you imagine the people that are all tied up in this, the lobbies, the politicians, the scientists, the tech firms, you'll realize that they are pulling the plug on it because they've been caught, because knowledge is catching up with the public. There's all kinds of reasons. Reset.
Back to history's mysteries, right?
Right.
Anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. We ran a little bit over the hour here, but that's all right because we're going deep late. The Civilization Cycle podcast live show every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. Tell your friends and family. Thank you for joining us. Please support our sponsors because they do support us, and also the newsletter. Check out the website, civilizationcycle.com. Right up at the top there, put in. I sent the show notes probably around 5 p.m. today if you all were on the list anyway, so look for those. Just 10 bullet points from our last conversation and last week to help you also start conversations and do some of your own research. Keywords are in there, bullet points, so you can type away, find what you're looking for, and then do a little bit deeper dive to try to keep you and your family safe as we move through this transitional period. So anyway, we'll see you